they're going to ask you questions on. It's important to supplement yourself with learning the finance behind healthcare.
Could we start with how you first moved to the United States?
I moved here early 2000s, finished nursing school in 2005. And back then, my family and I used to visit the US, well, in Chicago specifically, every summer, visiting, touristy areas and such. My dad wanted me to be a nurse. I went to nursing school. I finished my nursing school in the Philippines, finished all the requirements, the CGFNS, my English language test, and all the other requirements. For your listeners thinking about immigrating here in the US as a nurse, it's really important to check first the requirements of which state you guys are planning to go to, because there are different states in the US and each state has their own requirement. Some are similar, some are different. Like California is different from requirements of Texas. I would recommend to search first the state board of nursing of respective state that you plan to go to, and then look into the requirements of that specific state, because there are states where they require you to be licensed and board certified at your country where you finish your nursing school or not. And then each different states have their own type of English test, whether it's IELTS or the TOEFL. For me, I went through that process. I was planning on going to Illinois because that was the base of where my family and I would visit. And I took my board exam in the Philippines and did my CGFNS, the Certificate of Foreign Graduate Nurses. And then I even got my visa screen as well. I did TOEFL and IELTS. I don't know why I did it, but I just did both. With that, because my family had a tourist visa before, it was rather easier for us to travel here. And I took the NCLEX in Chicago and then waited until my work authorization was released. That gave me the legal means to start working. And before I waited for my work authorization, I had found an organization, a hospital that would petition me. Key things are, I decided the state that I needed to go to, which was Illinois. And then I looked into the requirements and then fulfill those requirements before you travel. And if you have a tourist visa, awesome. I went here, and then also have an employer petition you. Now, alternately, now I'm not an expert on another route, which is through an agency, but those are your alternatives for as a nurse to immigrate here. So you can approach a third-party agency or contracted with hospitals, or you can approach hospitals directly. They have international recruiting office as well, like for big medical centers or big hospitals. Then usually you have a contract with a hospital. I would read the fine print of what that contract is, because most of the time there is a length of employment, that a commitment required, which makes sense, right? Because they petition you, they would like for you to stay for a certain number of years. I would read the fine print on that, but those are the alternatives.
So how did you find the petitioner that filed your immigration files?
So it was through connections. My dad had friends who are nurses who worked in a hospital in Illinois, in Chicago. It was through connections that I got introduced to a hiring manager. At that time, it was a director of nursing. They were short of nurses. They were needing to get positions filled, and they were not getting nurses hired within their community. It was a good opportunity for me to present myself as hey, I'm a potential candidate. I have my NCLEX, I already have my board exam in the Philippines. I just need a hospital to petition me. That's how I started my petition for the hospital. Especially now, there are a lot of hospitals that is willing to petition nurses willing to work.
Especially with COVID, I think there are a lot of hospitals and clinics that are willing to sponsor nurses from abroad. They can commit for a few years and work here. What do you think nurses can do these days to sell themselves better?
It really starts with your resume or CV. That's the front and center of how you present yourself, because not often we get to present ourselves to the hiring manager right away. The very first step traditionally is through a recruiter. And the recruiter, can you imagine, especially now, there's a lot of people internationally want to go to the US, right? So can you imagine that there's tons of resumes that they have to go through. If you were a resume, would you want to hire yourself? If you ask yourself that, If I want to hire myself, what would I want to see in the resume? What is a job description as a nurse or which department? So it's really important to look in the resume and outline, do I have all my experiences outlined in my resume? Another key thing there too is that it's important that you highlight your accomplishments, because this is your portfolio. This is your summary of yourself as a professional to show them this is the value that I can contribute to the organization. So if you're applying for, let's say, a hospital specializes in neuro patients, it's also important to tailor your resume, highlighting your expertise, your experience on patients who have stroke or needs frequent neuro assessment, or even best if you have certifications on NIHSS assessment as well, that's also recognized here in the US, or whether you have ACLS, PALS, BLS, etc. It's important to outline those. What are your experience? Don't settle on what you do in your position, and don't just settle on like the generic, I take care of patients in a 24/7 unit. Go deeper. What accomplishments have you done? Let's say I have helped my department lower our CLABSI rate. I have helped our department decrease incidences of bed sores or decrease fall rates, and highlight what you did to contribute that, whatever that may be. A step above that is is it measurable? Have you contributed say 3 or 5% decrease on falls in a quarter? So it's really important to have that measurable, because that sets you apart from other candidates. So a recruiter that speaks about, this is a high performer, and this is a person that I'd like to invest our time, effort, and money in petitioning to get here in the US.
How about interview? Like, how can you represent yourself better in an interview?
Interview is all about preparation. Majority of the time, it's all about behavior related questions. What I mean by that is they're going to ask you questions on situations that you've experienced in the past and how you responded to that. The whole premise of that is, according to research, the best predictor of future behavior is how you behaved in the past in certain situations. To be able to determine if this is a safe nurse or good quality nurse, etc. It's important to remember 3 acronyms. BAR. B stands for background, A stands for action, and R stands for result. So let's say, for example, the hiring manager asks you, or even the recruiter asks you, tell me about a time that you handled a patient that was frustrated with their care. The way I answer that is, well, I had a background. I had a patient in the ED during night shift. We were very busy in the ED. We had a patient who was upset. He was upset about a delay in getting discharge papers, and they wanted to leave right away. A stands for action. What I did in that situation was I explained to the patient the situation in the ED. I acknowledged and I apologized. I was able to get the patient discharged as efficiently as possible, and because we had a code going on in the ED, and basically explaining the actions that you did, the steps that you did. You acknowledged the patient. Did you address quality concerns? Did you show respect? And then R stands for result. What was the outcome of that conversation? Was the patient understanding, and did you end up having to escalate the concern, or did you offer your manager's phone number to escalate their concern? These are the things that you can better structure your answers to the question. The person interviewing you can have a better way of scoring you in an interview or determining if you're a good fit. This is a good way to demonstrate that you are methodical, that you understand the thought process as well. This applies to any question, whether it's a medication error, whether it's patient experience error. One of the other things I would recommend too is practice, role play. Your coworker, your friends, role play about that. Hey, let's say you are the interviewer and I'm applying for the job. Role play, because a lot of times we get a stage fright where when we're asked a question point blank, or we're asked on a specific situation, sometimes we don't remember a specific situation right away. And if it's not the case, it's okay to say pause, or can we come back to that question? But it's important to practice and research on what are the possible questions. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake, or what was your biggest regret, or whatever that may be. Research those possible questions, nursing related questions, but know that you're going to get asked on safety, on quality, on patient experience, and how do you, in your collaboration, how do you work with your team? How do you work with someone who is bullying you? Or how do you speak up for safety? Let's say you witness your coworker make an error. What do? You can tailor it to your own basing on your experience. But the key thing to remember is how you structure your answers. So it's clear, it's concise, and it demonstrates that you have the quality experience as a nurse to practice safely here in the US.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
BAR, I'm going to remember it.
Yeah, BAR.
That's great. What was the transition from moving to the US as an immigrant, work as a staff nurse, and transition to a nurse manager in an emergency department?
I would say it wasn't an easy transition. My first management leadership job was back in 2014. I was an assistant manager official, right? I've been a charge nurse before, but an official role was 2014 when I was an assistant manager. The reason why I say it was difficult, and a lot of that stemmed from my self-limiting belief, right? I was worried about, like, what if they don't understand me? What about my language? What about my accent? What about, I don't understand the American culture or whatnot? And then I dug deeper into, why do I want to be a leader? Why does it fulfill me? What can I offer that leadership quality wise is of value to the organization? So it's really important to do some self-reflection first on, why do you want to be a leader? Because there are a lot of times in the leadership journey that you might question yourself, because it's sometimes a thankless job. But it's important to understand your motivation as a professional. What's your professional trajectory? Because that's going to guide you with the steps you take for your career, whether you progress to become a director, a CNO, or do you plan to are you just planning to try it out and see where it leads you? So it's really important to have that vision. A lot of times when you're starting a new role, especially when you're starting a role where there's tenure in the ER. What I mean by that is you have nurses or staff who have been there for 10 years or more. With that comes with an ingrained culture. And as a leader, you are perceived as a change agent. There's general anxiety, whether we like it or not, about, is this person going to create change? You know, we're comfortable. We've been here for 10 years. I don't want change. It's important to be able to recognize that. And I would say supplement that with understanding, how do you build trust and how do you lead change? And that's how I learned a lot of, how do you lead change? How do you build trust? How do you create cohesive team? Because that's really the very basics of leadership that you need to hone in. How do you communicate difficult news? How do you create buy-in? And how do you get your team to be able to be in one page? So communication skills is a big part of that too. In my journey, I studied a lot more on top above when I finished my MBA. For example, I went through neuro leadership on brain-based coaching. How do you provide coaching? By asking more questions. So supplement yourselves with a lot of those training, especially the role playing. A lot of those are very essential because it'll help you navigate through those tough spots in leadership. I would say lastly, it's important to supplement yourself with learning the finance behind healthcare, because when you're in leadership, you don't always get that training. I don't remember of any leader who got a formal financial training. They expect you to just go with it, and then you won't know that you didn't do well until you're told that, hey, your budget is off. It's really important to get the baseline of how to run a department, learn the basics of financial statements, understanding your target versus your budget, and having a good baseline on that and the communication skills really helped me have a well-rounded approach in leadership. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by saying